When you're driving down a dark, empty highway at night, your headlights sort of carve out this safe, predictable little bubble of reality, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you completely trust what you see in that illumination.
Right. If a deer jumps out, your brain says, okay, that's a deer. If a car passes, it's a car. We rely heavily on that visual feedback just to, stay grounded.
Well, because your brain fundamentally understands the rules of the road. It knows what belongs in that space, how gravity works, how to categorize objects. That binary system of recognition is actually incredibly comforting.
And here's the thing, what happens when you take that safe little bubble of reality and you lift it 4,500 feet into the pitch black sky over the open ocean, and suddenly something enters your headlights that, well, breaks every single rule of physics and logic?
Yeah, that is the exact moment the human brain scrambles.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, it tries desperately to force the impossible into a familiar, recognizable box.
Right.
And when it simply cannot make those pieces fit, you experience this very primal, disorienting terror.
And that specific terror is exactly what we're plunging into today in this deep dive. So the date is October 21st, 1978. A 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich is flying his light aircraft over the Bass Strait.
Which is a notoriously rough stretch of water separating mainland Australia from Tasmania.
Exactly. And the weather is perfect. The sky is crystal clear. But then he radios flight control to report this bizarre metallic object hovering over his plane. And just minutes later, he vanishes without a single trace.
It remains one of the most enduring, unsettling aviation mysteries of the 20th century, largely because we have the actual real-time audio transcript of his final moments.
Yeah, the transcript is wild. And to unpack this, we've brought a massive stack of sources to the table today. We are looking at the official Australian Department of Transport radio transcripts.
The primary source, basically.
Right. We also have a really comprehensive catalog of regional UFO or UAP reports from a database called Project 1947. Plus, we're pulling from an article in New Dawn magazine that covers the local folklore, a very rigorous skeptical analysis from Snopes, and a highly technical aeronautical breakdown from Flight Safety Australia.
It creates this really fascinating intersection of, raw data, regional mythology, and hard aeronautical science.
It really does. And the mission of this deep dive is to lay all of that out transparently. We are going to explore the cold, hard facts of the disappearance, the wildest extraterrestrial theories that sprouted in its wake, and the grounded psychological science behind what likely happened in that cockpit.
Right, without taking a definitive side.
Exactly. Whether you are a diehard UFO believer, a strict skeptic, or just someone. So let's start by establishing the timeline of the flight itself. It's 6:19 p.m. Frederick Valentich takes off from Moorabbin Airport in Victoria, heading south toward King Island.
And he's flying a Cessna 182L, registration VHDSJ.
Right, and he's relatively inexperienced, right? Like about 150 flight hours under his belt.
Yeah, 150 hours. Not brand new, but certainly not a seasoned veteran.
So the flight proceeds normally until 7:06 p.m. when he radios the Melbourne Flight Service Unit and speaks to an air traffic officer named Steve Roby. And over the next 5 minutes, this genuinely terrifying exchange unfolds.
The transcript begins mundanely enough, Valentich keys his mic and asks, is there any known traffic below 5,000?
Just a standard check.
Exactly. Roby checks his radar and replies, no known traffic. Then Valentich delivers a line that instantly changes the whole tone of the flight. He says, seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000.
So Roby asks him what type of aircraft it is, and Valentich replies, I cannot affirm. It is four bright, it seems to me like landing lights. He then reports that the unknown aircraft just passed right over him, at least 1,000 feet above.
And naturally, he asks Roby if there are any military aircraft operating in the area.
Which Roby confirms there are none.
Right. And you can tell from the transcript that the anxiety really begins to bleed into Valentich's transmissions. He tells Roby the object is approaching him from due east. He says, it seems to me that he's playing some sort of game. He's flying over me 2-3 times at a time at speeds I could not identify.
Reading the transcript, honestly, it feels eerily similar to the script of a found footage horror movie.
Oh, completely.
You can just sense the total isolation.
Mm-hmm.
He is sitting in a tiny single-engine Cessna in the pitch dark, and he genuinely believes something massive is actively toying with him. But, looking at this critically, we are talking about a 20-year-old kid. Could Valentich just be pulling an elaborate prank? Like, could he have keyed his mic to mess with flight control just to alleviate boredom?
Well, as you read further into the transcript, the physical reality of his situation begins to deteriorate in a way that would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to fake convincingly.
How so?
He explicitly states, it's hovering and it's not an aircraft. He describes the object as having a green light, being metallic and shiny on the outside, but the real turning point is when his own aircraft begins to fail.
Yeah, that's at 7:11 p.m. Valentich reports the engine is rough idling. I
Yeah.
got it set at 23:24 and the thing is coughing.
That specific phrase is vital. I mean, for a layperson, 2324 just sounds like technical jargon, but he is referring to his engine power settings.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Specifically, 23 inches of manifold pressure and 2,400 revolutions per minute. That is the standard cruising power setting for a Cessna 182.
Ah, got it.
By stating those numbers, he's communicating to flight control that he isn't doing anything radical with the controls. He is trying to fly straight and level, but the engine is losing power entirely on its own.
Wow. And then he reiterates his fear one last time, saying, that strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering and it's not an aircraft.
And that's the end of his voice.
Right. He leaves the microphone open. Flight control records 17 seconds of an open transmission featuring this strange staccato metallic scraping noise. Then, dead silence. He's gone.
And no trace of him or the plane is found by the initial search and rescue teams.
Now, if Valentich had been the only person hallucinating or seeing unusual things in the sky that night, it would be easy to categorize this as just, a tragic case of a pilot suffering a localized mental break.
Exactly. But the context provided by our sources paints a much broader, much stranger picture.
If he was hallucinating, you'd expect his sighting to be isolated. But the terrifying reality of October 1978 is that he wasn't alone.
Not even close.
The Project 1947 catalog, compiled by Keith Basterfield, documents a massive wave of unidentified aerial phenomena sightings in the Bass Strait region around the exact time Valentich vanished.
The sheer volume and variety of the reports during that so-called flap are just staggering. I mean, people from all walks of life were looking up and seeing anomalies.
Like the tennis players.
Yeah. In the town of Corio, a group of 12 tennis players and several cricketers actually stopped their games to watch what they described as twin silver cigars connected by pipes.
That is so specific.
Right, moving slowly overhead with no wings and making zero sound.
And there was a woman in Brighton driving along the beach road who reported seeing a massive metallic spaceship traveling across the bay. But honestly, the most tangible piece of evidence from this entire flap comes from a plumber named Roy Manifold.
Oh, the Crayfish Bay photos.
Yes. So Manifold was on vacation at Crayfish Bay, which is geographically just a few miles from where Valentich made his final radio call.
Very close.
He sets his camera up on a tripod to take pictures of the sunset with an automatic sequence right around 6:45 p.m. That is just 20 minutes before Valentich Radio's Melbourne flight service.
And Manifold doesn't notice anything unusual with his naked eye while he's there.
No, nothing. But when the film is developed, the sequence reveals a bizarre anomaly. The fourth photo in the sequence shows a dense black lump appearing to rise out of the extremely calm water.
Right.
Then the fifth photo looks completely normal, but the sixth photo shows a strange mass rocketing into the sky directly over the spot where the black lump had been, leaving what looks like an exhaust trail.
And of course, the Royal Australian Air Force initially tried to dismiss this as a breaking cumulus cloud.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Did that explanation hold up?
Not at all. Photographic experts quickly ruled that explanation out just by looking at the mechanism of the camera itself.
Right, because of the timer.
Exactly. Manifold had his camera set to take a photo at specific timed intervals, roughly every 20 seconds. If that mass was a breaking cumulus cloud, its appearance and disappearance between those frames meant the cloud would have had to travel across the sky at an impossible supersonic speed.
Wow.
Yeah, the math of the shutter interval simply doesn't support the military's cloud theory. It remains a genuine, unexplained anomaly captured on film just minutes before the disappearance.
What stands out when reading through the entire Project 1947 catalog, however, is that many of these sightings actually do have mundane, verifiable explanations.
They do, yeah.
The catalog notes that the Orion meteor shower was peaking that week, which perfectly accounts for the fast, bright white streaks people reported. There were tethered promotional balloons over shopping centers. There were even meteorological optical illusions called glories forming on the clouds.
What's fascinating here is that a glory is a really compelling optical phenomenon. It looks like a bright halo of rainbow colors surrounding a shadow, caused by sunlight scattering backward through water droplets in clouds or fog.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally see how that would look otherworldly.
Right. And when the local news is already buzzing with UFO reports, The human brain is incredibly susceptible to misinterpreting natural phenomena like meteors or glories as extraterrestrial craft.
But here's where it gets really interesting, based on what the catalog highlights. Despite hundreds of sightings of meteors, balloons, twin cigars, and starfish shapes, nobody else reported a large, metallic, aircraft-like object with the 4 bright lights and a green light.
Yeah.
Valentich's specific object was entirely unique to him.
Exactly. Out of all the weirdness occurring in the sky that week, his exact description stands completely alone.
And this exact isolation, the fact that nobody else saw his specific UFO, it created a vacuum. And in a vacuum, folklore thrives. Which brings us to an account from New Dawn magazine that completely crosses the line from an aviation mystery into modern mythology.
Oh, you're talking about the farmer.
Yes. The author, Bill Chalker, writes about a story passed along by a local businessman concerning a farmer in South Australia.
It's a wild story.
Supposedly, the morning after Valentich disappears, this farmer is out harvesting his lucerne crop. He hears a deafening screeching noise, steps off his tractor, and realizes he is standing underneath a massive shadow. He looks up, and directly above him is a 30-meter-wide flying saucer.
And the farmer's description is remarkably detailed, isn't it?
Unbelievably detailed.
He claims the craft had counter-rotating outer rings, a domed top with a black weather seal, and something resembling a curved church door with no handles.
But the absolute wildest part of the story is what was stuck to the side of the saucer. Plastered flat against the hull of this UFO is an entire Cessna 182.
Just stuck there.
Yes. The farmer claimed it was dripping engine oil, the tail was hanging down, and he could clearly read the registration letters. DSJ Valentich's plane.
It's so cinematic.
The farmer allegedly scratched the registration number into his tractor with a nail because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And when his neighbor later claims to have seen a Cessna parked in his top paddock, the farmer investigates and finds no plane. But he does find 3 tire tracks and a pool of flamin' engine oil.
I mean, on the surface, this has all the hallmarks of an urban legend.
Totally. It's a third-hand story, the farmer's name is conveniently lost to time, and it sounds like a tall tale.
Right. But to understand why this specific brand of extreme folklore latched onto the Valentich case, you really have to look at the psychological priming of the pilot himself.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, Frederick Valentich was an avid UFO enthusiast. His own father, Guido, confirmed that Fred studied them as a serious hobby.
He was really into it. He had even been given access to some confidential Air Force UFO files at one point, apparently.
Exactly. And his 17-year-old girlfriend, Rhonda Rushton, told investigators that just days before the fatal flight, Fred said to her, "If a UFO landed in front of us now, I would go in it, but never without you."
Wow. That is haunting in retrospect.
It is. And you also have to factor in the cultural atmosphere of 1978. Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind had just premiered in Australian cinemas a few months prior.
Oh, right.
The whole zeitgeist was saturated with the idea of extraterrestrial visitation. Valentich's mind was culturally and personally primed for a close encounter.
So it forces us to ask a difficult question, right?
Yeah.
We have a young pilot obsessed with UFOs, flying into a region experiencing a massive UFO flap, who literally tells his girlfriend he'd willingly board a spaceship.
Right.
How much did his belief system actually shape his fate? Did his expectation of seeing a UFO cause him to misinterpret something mundane, leading to a fatal error?
And this brings us right to the psychological and aeronautical analysis from Snopes and Flight Safety Australia. Because when you strip away the urban legends and examine the physics, the astronomy, and the human psychology of that night, a highly plausible, scientifically grounded explanation emerges directly from Valentich's own words.
Let's start with the 4 bright landing lights he described hovering above him. What was that?
Astronomers have actually run the celestial charts for the Bay Strait on the exact minute of October 21st, 1978. In the clear, dark sky, right in Valentich's field of view, were 4 incredibly bright celestial bodies.
Let me guess.
Venus, which was at its absolute brightest, Mars, Mercury, and the bright star Antares. And they were clustered together in a distinct diamond shape.
Okay, that makes perfect sense for the 4 lights. But what about the green light? The light he specifically said made the object look metallic and shiny.
Well, a Cessna 182 operates with standard navigation lights. You've got a red light on the port wing, a white light on the tail, a bright green light on the starboard wingtip.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Yeah, and a pitch black cockpit over dark water. That starboard green light can reflect brightly off the cockpit windshield. So when you combine the reflection of your own green wingtip light with four bright planets hovering in the distance, a primed brain will absolutely connect the dots.
This is a textbook example of expectation bias, isn't it?
100%.
It's like sitting on a train at a station. You are completely stationary. Suddenly, the train on the tracks right next to you starts to pull forward.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
Right. For a split second, your brain completely convinces you that your train is moving backwards. You physically feel the momentum in your stomach, you brace yourself, your brain just fills in the gaps with incorrect information based on a visual illusion.
That train analogy perfectly illustrates how expectation bias works. Valentich's brain, loaded with UFO lore, saw those lights, experienced the illusion of relative motion, and constructed a spaceship.
That's incredible.
But the physics of visual illusions also perfectly explain the most tragic part of the transcript. At one point, Valentich says, "What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me."
But he wasn't orbiting a UFO, was he?
No. He was caught in what aviation experts call a graveyard spiral.
Let's break down the anatomy of a graveyard spiral because it is crucial to understanding how this happens to even experienced pilots.
Okay, so your inner ear relies on fluid in your vestibular system to sense motion, balance, and gravity. When you enter a slow, sustained banking turn, perhaps because you are tilting your wings to match a false, tilted horizon created by the setting sun over dark water, that fluid inside your ear eventually catches up to the motion and stabilizes.
So because the fluid stops moving, your brain registers zero movement. You feel like you're flying perfectly straight and level, even though your plane is banked at a dangerous angle.
Exactly. Imagine standing in a funhouse room where the floor is tilted at a 30-degree angle, but the walls and ceiling are painted to make the room look perfectly flat.
Okay.
If you try to stand up straight based entirely on what you see, ignoring your physical sense of balance, you'll fall over. Because the plane's wings are banked, the aircraft naturally loses lift and begins to descend.
And the pilot notices their altitude dropping on the altimeter, right?
Yes, but because their inner ear tells them they are flying level, they instinctively pull back on the yoke to climb.
But pulling back while in a bank doesn't make you climb. It just tightens the turn.
Exactly. The plane accelerates downward in a tightening corkscrew. And this perfectly explains the engine problems Valentich reported.
The coughing and rough idling.
Right. He said his engine was rough idling and coughing. Centrifugal forces in a tight, uncorrected spiral disrupt the fuel flow in the carburetor, literally starving the engine of gas.
Oh, wow.
Alternatively, as the plane accelerates in a steep dive, the fixed-pitch propeller starts spinning too fast from the rushing airflow, which over-revs the engine.
So the metallic scraping noise at the end of the tape
Was highly likely the sound of an overstressed engine tearing itself apart, or the catastrophic impact with the water.
That is just heartbreaking. And the Flight Safety Australia report underscores the human tragedy behind the physics, too. Frederick Valentich was under immense psychological pressure.
He really was. He had failed all 5 of his commercial pilot exams twice.
And just 3 months prior to this flight, he failed 3 of them for a third time.
Yeah. He was a 20-year-old kid who desperately wanted to fly for a living. He was running out of time to prove himself to his family and his instructors.
And he was deeply distracted, mentally exhausted, and he became fatally disoriented in the dark.
What we have here, really, is a genuine human tragedy wrapped inside a perfect storm of circumstances. You have an intense period of regional UFO sightings, a pilot whose perception was amplified by pop culture and expectation bias, and the brutal, unforgiving laws of aerodynamics and human physiology.
It's a lot all at once.
We may never recover the plane, but we have a flawless case study in the collision of astronomy, psychology, and myth-making.
So the next time you are absolutely certain of what you are seeing with your own 2 eyes in the dark, remember Fred Valentich. Remember how powerful expectation bias is.
Definitely.
Remember how easily our brains, when pushed to the edge of stress and disorientation, can take a star and a reflection and turn them into a spaceship?
Our perception of reality is far more fragile than we ever like to admit.
It really is. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final lingering detail from the official Department of Transport files that demands attention.
Right, the debris.
Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the right one, points to a tragic crash caused by spatial disorientation. A graveyard spiral into the base strait. But the official files note that in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance, search aircraft did spot a debris field floating in the water.
They reported seeing oil and wreckage.
Yes. But before the surface rescue boats could reach those specific coordinates, the search planes completely lost sight of the debris. It just vanished.
And furthermore, despite years of extensive searching in the area, only one single piece of a Cessna 182 was ever found.
Just one piece.
A tiny engine cowl panel that washed up on King Island in 1983, 5 full years later.
So I leave you to ponder this. In a heavily searched, relatively narrow strait of water, how does an entire, highly visible debris field simply vanish before rescue boats can arrive? What else might be hiding in the pitch-black space between what we know for sure and what we want to believe?